So, good morning, everybody, and I would like to say that I captured the online synchronous session, but unfortunately, as I said in my note, I forgot to hit record. So, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do the presentation part of that again. And I will, as I go through the presentation, answer some of the questions that came up in the session so that you'll get the benefit of those as well. One thing, don't forget that I am subscribed to the Ask the Instructor board. So if you have a question about this class, I would encourage you to post it there. I will get an almost immediate notification, and then I'll respond in the Ask the Instructor board, which will then allow everybody to see the question and the answer. Of course, I'll also respond to emails, but consider that when you get started if you have any questions, because that might be the place for you to look to begin with to see if somebody else asked. But okay, we're going to get started, and we're going to get into this idea of what Management 676 is all about. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the first case, Lincoln Electric. So the thing that's important about the course objectives is that this is a synthesis class. It's an integration class. So if you were in my class last semester, you heard me say multiple times that the purpose of a case is to apply the course concepts to a problem. Well, now you're in a class where the purpose of the case is to apply program concepts to a problem. So that means that rather than being in an economics class, so you know that the question of the case is an economics question, now you're going to do a series of cases where you have to determine what the best tool for the job is. And it might be that within a single case, there is the issue of economics, and perhaps there's also an issue related to leadership, and there might also be an issue related to, let's say, finance. So this is a comprehensive class, and it's a class that requires you to use data from the problem and logic in the application of the tools that you've learned, as opposed to your own experience, beliefs, and values. This has been the case all along, but in this class it's particularly important. So here's what class participation looks like. One thing that sometimes students do is they approach the class as if it is a giant final exam. Well, that's not really the case. I mean, in some ways, it does sort of reflect what you've learned over the course of the program, but there will be a lot that you will still learn through the discussion and seeing how other people approach specific problems and so forth. So there are two ways to participate. One is in the online synchronous session that will be offered every Thursday morning, except for this one, and I say Thursday morning, it will be offered every Thursday, except for this Thursday. And then the other is through a discussion board, which also there's not a discussion board this time. So participating through going through this video will suffice for this time around. You will notice that the rhythm of the class is actually quite a bit different than the classes in the past. So in this case, written assignments are due no later than Wednesday at 11:59 p.m., except for this week. The first discussion board post then is due no later than Thursday at 11:59 p.m. And the final discussion board post is due on Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So this is substantially different than what you're accustomed to, where all of the written stuff ends up on Sunday. And the reason for that is there is nothing for us to discuss until you have completed the assignment. So in the online setting, I've always done it this way, where I give a week, like this one, which is pretty open. The assignment this week is not due until Sunday evening, which means that you have an opportunity to go ahead and start looking at next week with the idea that you have to get that finished by Wednesday night. Then we have a session on Thursday morning. Everyone has finished the assignment or the discussion board on Thursday morning, which then means that everyone's finished the assignment, and now we can get down to what actually happened, how people approached it, where people struggled, and what creative ideas there were. And then that's what we do through Sunday. So it is a different rhythm, and I want to make sure that, from the beginning, that you pay attention to that, because if not, you don't want to get behind is the issue. And so you want to figure out how you're going to schedule your weeks so that you can do that from the beginning. If you join the synchronous session on Thursday, you can do that rather than doing the discussion board, but you need to have already submitted the work, and you need to be ready to have your cameras on and be fully engaged in that discussion. Now, everybody does the discussion board next week. Not this week, but next week, because it is important to get a feel for what the discussion board is actually going to be like, and that will let all of us do it so that everybody then is ready for the upcoming discussion boards after that. Then there's a minimum requirement of 4 more synchronous sessions or discussion boards. Might be helpful for you to come to all of them, but the grade will come from 5 of them. Week 2 plus 4 additional weeks. Now, let's talk about case analyses for a minute, because you will have 2 of these to do. You'll have an individual one, and you will do one as a group. You can choose the format that you want to use. So if, like last semester, you want to arrange it as a problem statement, a set of hypotheses, an analysis under each hypothesis, and so on, please feel free to do that. If you want to just take the questions that are provided in the syllabus that have to be answered and organize it that way, feel free to do that as well. Just keep in mind that the format impacts the clarity of your argument. So a rambling essay is still not a good idea. Use headings, use paragraphs, use all of the things that help write at a graduate level. And that is the expectation, that the paper is written in a format that supports the purpose of the paper, that it is proofread, that it is as error-free as it can be, because really those are not, as I've said to some of you in feedback on individual papers, that's not a nitpick. That is about making as powerful an argument as you can. So the case analysis is really going to cover the same kind of things that you become accustomed to. It will need to, and this is in the syllabus, it will need to have a clear problem statement that lets us know who the protagonist is. You need to state the key issues and the tools that you've used to do the analysis, and then provide a solution that has the protagonist as the active agent. And in that solution, be as detailed as possible about what exactly they should do. Now, being detailed does not mean that you've written 3 paragraphs about each recommendation. It just means be clear about the action. What is it that ultimately this person, needs to have done? And then the final piece is something that if you were in my class last semester, we didn't do. And the final piece is, how will the protagonist know that the actions are working? So what metrics could they use? So let's give an example. So if the problem is that sales have dropped to 25% of what they used to be, then it might be that if they execute your solution, then they should follow sales per quarter as a metric to determine whether your solution is working. It's even better if you can suggest what those sales per quarter might be increase-wise from one quarter to the next. But the point is, let us know, okay, if we do this, how do we know that it's working? Now, the other assignment that you'll have is a case summary. And a case summary allows you to present the important elements of the case without writing the whole case out. And it's actually intended to develop skills in breaking down your work to the most important elements. The format of a case summary follows a logical process that you could use outside of here if you have done some particular research or done an analysis for your boss or whomever, and now you're supposed to present the results. This is a really good format to get used to. But keep in mind, you cannot do a summary if you don't analyze the case. A summary presents what you did, not what you would do. So the only difference between a summary and an analysis is the fact that a summary is going to be 2 or 3 pages that gives us, the approach and the tools and the outcomes, but really doesn't show all of the work. A case analysis, on the other hand, is going to show all of the work. So for example, in a case summary, I might say, I used a SWOT analysis to look at the opportunities and the threats, and as a result, the biggest threat is. Okay, that's going to work in a case summary. In a case analysis, where you're going to make that same point, I would expect to see the whole SWOT analysis. So the real difference here is, as you're doing your analysis for a summary, you could be doing it on a notepad, you could be doing it on your iPad, you could be doing it wherever, but you're still going to have to do it. It's just not, you're just not going to have to report all of the details. Now, in this class, it is really important that you pay attention to the schedule of assignments. So for this week, everybody has a set of questions as the assignment. No discussion board is necessary, although, like I said, Ask the Instructor is open. In week 2, everybody does a case summary on McDonald's, and everybody is required to do discussion board 1. The synchronous session will happen on Thursday morning and every Thursday morning after, but since everyone is required to do the discussion board, that synchronous session is solely optional. And then during weeks 3 through 8, some people will be doing a summary, some will be doing an individual case, and some will be doing a group analysis. So by the end, you will have done 1 individual analysis, 1 group analysis, 5 case summaries, and then 5 either discussion boards or synchronous sessions. Now do the math. Like right now, do the math. Because yes, you get a vacation week as long as it's not your individual analysis week or your group analysis week. So if you count, you will see that there are 7 assignments there as opposed to 8. And this is because, I would like to say it's because I decided to give you a break. What actually happened was I forgot that I had decided that Lincoln Electric would be counted as a case summary. And as a result, there's only 7 out there. So you know what? Rather than trying to make each assignment worth 1/6 of 100 points, I decided, you know what? I'm just going to give you a break. So you get to pick a week. The only thing I ask is that you let me know if that's going to be the week that you skip the summary. And then 2 other things in this class. There are 2 program assessments that are the post-test for assessments that you've done before. So the Peregrine CPC and the critical thinking assessment. I will have both of those posted this week, so you can do them whenever it's available, whenever you have some time. But it has to be done by the end of the semester. And then week 7, you will also start some light preparation work for simulation. And by light simulation, or light work, I mean that week 7, you'll be asked to log into the simulation system and I think watch the orientation. Week 8, you'll be asked to go back in and I think it's do a couple of the tutorials. Whatever it is, we've worked it out so that it's not overwhelming to be finishing this class and preparing for that one. And then that gives us week 9, which is full-on preparation for the simulation. And then week 10, which is the actual simulation. So that'll start to overlap. You'll hear more about it, but the idea is that it's not too overwhelming. Okay, so each week I'm going to have a short video about the case for that week. And I actually hope to complete them all this week so that they're available for you to watch. And what I'm going to do is just summarize some of the key ideas around that case. The purpose of a problem-based learning and of a case is for you to struggle a little bit with it. But I don't want you spending a lot of time struggling on things that are not important. So we'll go through just for a few minutes. Let me give you some thoughts about Lincoln Electric. First of all, this is a good case for us to start on. It is fairly complex, although initially it seems kind of obvious, and it requires a thought process from multiple disciplines. So it's not just a finance case, it's not just a leadership case, it's not just anything. You'll have to figure out, given the problem, what tools you need to come up with a solution. Now, Lincoln Electric has a good reason to think that it can succeed in India, because their plan is to produce high value-added equipment in an environment where there are clearly some unmet needs, and also because Lincoln Electric spreads their fixed costs in a pretty centralized way so that they can do so even with international operations. Now, there are some other things that appear to be kind of a problem for Lincoln Electric, and those are things like culture and trying to figure out, the advantages between a joint venture and an acquisition and a build are all complicated when you're not there in the environment already. So the one thing that you should know is that there will never be a case where the solution is don't do anything. It's just simply not going to be that way. It makes no sense that there would have been at least a couple of academics, usually a few research assistants or teaching assistants, and they write a 24-page paper, and the actual response to the case is don't do anything. So, that's the case with Lincoln as well. But it is a read the whole case at least twice kind of case. For one thing, there's a lot of backstory. The backstory is there to provide context, and it's not like it's entirely smoke or fluff, but it lets you know kind of where they are, but there's a lot of it. The same is true of the data at the end of the case. There are tons of data, and you'll have to decide which data is important to you and which isn't. And the only way you're going to have to be able to do that is to start out by figuring out what your problem is so that you can make your way through the data. So one way to approach this is to imagine that you are the protagonist. Now, I don't know if I said this before or not, but I've said many times that typically the protagonist is a person, not a company. And it might be that later there will be at least one case that's the company, but that's not Lincoln Electric. Lincoln Electric has a protagonist, and it's Strupke. It's pretty obvious when you read the case because he's the narrator at the beginning and throughout, or at the end for sure. And so one of the things that you can consider is, if you are Strupke, what do you need to know in order to make a decision? So starting from there, and he's trying to make a decision about how to get into India, then you might look at the case and say, well, he needs to know if the environment and the culture would fit with Lincoln Electric. He needs to know what the cost of these various options would be. He needs to know if there's anybody that's even interested in working with them. So start with the questions and what needs to be learned, and then think about the tools and models that you've learned in the last year that would help answer the question. Now, sometimes people start with the tools and then try to come up with a question. So for example, I may feel very comfortable doing the 4 Ps analysis. But it might be that this case has nothing to do with that. So what ends up happening is I use a tool that really doesn't help, but I know how to use it. SWOTs are one of those where, a SWOT has a purpose. It addresses a very specific thing. Because I know how to do a SWOT doesn't mean that it's helpful. What's better is to figure out what I'm trying to accomplish and then find the tool from there. And remember that you are the analyst, not Stropke. So, for example, if you were to say in your recommendation, Stropke needs to do needs to determine the discounted cash flow of some of the acquisition targets. Well, that might be true, but the case provides you enough that you could actually do that analysis, and you should, so that it helps you with your recommendations. The recommendations need to help him take action, not give him a list of tasks he needs to do. So, again, answer as many questions as you can that are relevant to solving the problem. And sometimes that means that you have to estimate. Now, I'm not going to belabor this except to say that the feedback that says the case didn't have enough data for me to do the analysis that I wanted to do may be true, but it's not particularly valid because the case is the case and it provides enough data to do an analysis. That is a guarantee. But what you might need to do is you might need to estimate some particular area or data that you need in order to do the analysis. And you can do that if there is strong reasoning for your estimate, if it is based on evidence, and if you let us know why you estimated it and from where you estimated it, so that we can also make a judgment about, okay, so they really don't know what cost of capital is, so instead they did 10% and then 15% and then 5%, and that gives us a really good range, and we can look at all of that and see, does it make sense? A couple of quick notes about Lincoln Electric and others. Avoid searching for what really happened until after you've written the case. Remember that cases are written for the purpose of problem-based analysis, which means that they often are based on truth, but almost never are they a documentary. And by that I mean, for example, even with this case, that this is not exactly the problem Lincoln was facing, but it is close. The authors provide certain data and don't provide other data, and they create some data for the purpose of the case that is not actually part of what the real scenario was. That's because a case analysis is an assignment. So going out to see what actually happened is not helpful. And this particular thing is not about plagiarism. It's about the fact that you'll get the assignment wrong. You'll try to force a solution onto the case, and we'll do it without the right data and approach, because you're trying to base it on something that we don't have as much detail about. However, speaking of plagiarism, I do feel the need to bring this up, and that is, if you do a really quick Google search, you're going to find that there are many copies of Management 676 papers out there. So keep in mind, it is a violation to submit a paper to an essay site. It's a violation of our integrity policy. It is a violation to take a paper from an essay site. And from my personal experience, Coach Hero, college essays, master papers, papers out, however they present themselves, they are not allowed for this. As of this date, and I know this number because I'm involved in every one of these cases when they come up, at least 6 Management 676 students in the last 5 years have had to come back and take this class again because they made a poor choice about where their paper came from and as a result failed the class. It is a lot better to get a C or a B than to get an F. If it's going to take you an extra day, you'll notice in the syllabus there is a penalty for being late, and there is a limit to how late you can be. But if that's going to impact your grade by even a couple of letters, it's still a lot better than getting wrapped up in something like this. So please avoid it. It's just not worth it in any way. Okay. So that is the presentation. Every week I will answer questions. We'll talk about the case that we've done. And every week I will post a video about the case for that week to give you some idea of how to approach it. Please use the Ask the Instructor board or send me an email. Let me know if you have questions. If you are having a problem, if things have come up, if there are things getting in the way of you being successful, please let me know, and let me know as soon as you can. Sometimes I can't do anything about it, but then again, sometimes we can figure it out. So as you've gone through this, go back, look at the syllabus, and if you have any questions, let me know right away. I look forward to working with you in this class. I truly do. I enjoy this class, and I enjoy the insights that come from it. So let's hope we all have a great summer, and I will talk to you again soon.